The city lights are twinkling, and the stars have all come out. Been sitting here for hours and hours, trying to figure it out. I don't feel you here. You're certainly not gone. Been wondering why we'd want to keep carrying on. Keep carrying on. Don't think for a moment that I didn't love you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Republic Over Democracy podcast. This is episode 3, and today we will be talking about the line between free speech and private commerce. As you can pretty much figure out from the title of this show, this is going to be about how Facebook has yet again, through another purge, eliminated individuals from their platform, almost exclusively conservative right-wing figures, such as InfoWars personnel and Milo Yiannopoulos. Now, they do this under the guise of saying, well, hate speech is not welcome on our platform. What is hate speech? You know, I've asked people before, can you truly define what a hate crime is? I mean, to me, anytime you harm an individual, and I'm not talking about defrauding the state or not paying your taxes or, getting a traffic violation. I'm talking about what is a hate crime as it pertains to actually harming an individual. I mean, if I walk up to you and punch you in the face, is it any more harmful, or do you feel any more actual pain than if I say, I'm going to punch you in the face because you're a different skin color than me, or you worship a different religion from me, or you have a different sexual orientation from me? Do you actually suffer any more physical pain? Do you actually incur any additional medical bills because I punched you in the face based on what is being considered hate crime criteria? Same thing with hate speech. What is hate speech? I mean, if I cuss you out, is it any more of a demeaning thing to do because of the same criteria that falls under hate crime? Now, what's interesting here is that not only did Facebook ban another list of these people, again, almost exclusively based on political ideology, but then the mainstream media took and ran with this and included the likes of Louis Farrakhan in the label of right-wing ideology. Now, anybody that hasn't been living under a rock for the last 60 years knows that Louis Farrakhan is anything but right-wing. But yet the media has lumped him into the same group as InfoWars people, as Alex Jones, as Milo. But this isn't the first time the mainstream media has dabbled with this sort of political voodooery. You see, back when it was first revealed that Virginia's governor Ralph Northam was involved in some racist photo back in his college days. CNN put out in one of their banner headlines you see at the bottom of the screen, they put him as a Republican. He is a Democrat. Now, one could just say, oh, well, that was just a mistake, an error. I'm like, this is CNN we're talking about. We're not talking about some, blogger or some, independent broadcast media. This is an organization with millions, if not billion-dollar budgets. They don't get this wrong on mistake. It's an entire psyop. It's an entire agenda to get your mentality trained to see Republican or right-wing associated with any and all act of supposed hate crime or hate speech. They don't do this by mistake. It's a purposeful act. But let's talk about a little bit about private commerce. Now, there's a lot of Republicans out there on social media today who are calling for the federal government to regulate Facebook, to regulate Twitter, and all other social media platforms, to regulate their activity so that they supposedly won't be able to discriminate against people other than allowing other people than liberals on their platform. Here's my problem with that. If we start allowing the federal government to regulate social media, then we literally invite everything that's happening now only turned up to 11. What do you think is going to happen? And this will happen. It's not a question of if, but a when. Okay? Despite all the economic explosion that's happening in this country, record unemployment, record GDP growth, this is going to happen. We will, probably in the next 10 years, have a Democrat president again. We already have a Democrat-controlled U.S. House. The Republicans don't exactly hold that much of a majority in the U.S. Senate, so it's not out of the question that Democrats will take control of both houses of Congress. Again, what do you think one of the things they will do if they get that majority control, and including have a Democrat in the White House? And we have told the federal government they must regulate social media. We would see a level of political censorship that would make the amount of censorship we have seen thus far look silly by nature. We would have said, boy, I wish we could go back to 2019 and hope that we could have stopped ourselves from demanding this. I mean, we already have a government that spies on its people. We already have a government full of people on both sides of the aisle that want government control over every facet of our lives. From what we drive, what we eat, what we drink, what we put in our bodies, our health care. They already thirst and hunger for the wealth that we make. You think they wouldn't go ahead and take today's initiatives and turn it up to 11 and flat out use social media as a means of identifying people to go after, round up, and put in prison? Does anybody not remember the Alien Sedition Acts of our early American history? If you don't, let me remind you of what those laws were. Those laws were meant to explicitly prohibit anyone from speaking ill will of our government. That is precisely what would be put in place if we were to successfully demand that the federal government regulate online content, to regulate social media. Because they do not act in their good faith to allow us more free speech, to allow us more of a voice. The government we have today, in its $22 trillion deficit, isn't designed to allow us more freedom. Our government today cannot operate without first taking away from us. They can't financially operate. They cannot even politically operate. They cannot even operate on a global scale without taking away from us. In 2019, we still have the Selective Service. Even though there's no forced draft, per se. So we can't even say that we own our own bodies, because the government says they have control over us, to force us to sign up for a selective service. We don't even own our own cars and our own homes after they're paid off, because they insist they must tax our property, our vehicles, in order to operate. So you think they would stop and say, no, we're not going to regulate social media? That we're not going to use that as a means of controlling dissent and controlling propaganda? You have to be plumb outside of your mind to believe that our government would be capable of such restraint. So what can be done? Well, obviously, Facebook and Twitter were not always the top platforms. They were not always the number one place for people to go to in order to see what was going on. So instead of demanding that government step in and do anything, why not have somebody else with the means, financial or skill set otherwise, create a competing platform? Anybody remember MySpace? Well, it was the top platform at one time. Everybody had Tom as a friend. But yet, it fell to the wayside, and Facebook came to power. So there's no reason why we should be demanding that government step in. We should just have another platform come up and compete. That's it. That's all that needs to be done. Until the next episode, stay free, my friends.